What's up, Julie?
Hi, how are you?
Good, good.
Where is everyone? On their way?
I have no idea. I think Madison's going for Zoom too.
Oh, she is. Nice. Oh, Luch, I'm not going to be there on Friday. I already told Eric. So can you send me the link after for the recording?
Yeah. Yeah, sounds good.
Awesome. Thank
They're all
you.
in that folder. You know the folder that they go in? I don't know if you have the link for that.
I don't
They're
know if I
all,
have the link to that.
I'll send the link to you then.
Okay. I might. I have like a lot of different emails, and some of them I was like, it was a little overwhelming of what was what. So.
Yep. Yeah, no worries. Madison.
Hello.
What up, what up?
Getting
So
ready.
the class today is just me and you guys. I'm your professor for the day.
Nice.
Where is everyone running behind?
I have no idea.
Seems like it.
Madison, how's studying going?
I'm actually studying right now. I'm in the middle of taking a practice test. I mean, I'm gonna pause it during boot camp, but I was like, I really want to finish this test, so I'll just Zoom this meeting.
Uh-huh.
It's going. I don't really know, Julie.
I feel the same way as you if it makes you feel any better. Sometimes I feel like I like know everything, and then I've only taken a couple of the practice tests because like are you doing the Freedom Trail one?
Yeah.
Yeah, so Jess gave me her login for that because I went through a different company and they were awful.
So did I. Jacob gave me his.
Yeah,
They're helpful though, the actual tests.
Yeah, so I've done 3 of them so far. The last one I scored in the 80s, so I'm feeling okay.
Oh, an 80 is good. I scored a 63, so it's time.
You're fine. If you start there, then you're only going to go up.
I have 2 weeks, so yeah.
Yeah, you're fine. I have like 2 days, so.
Your test is in 2 days, Julie?
Saturday.
October 2nd, right?
The 3rd,
right?
so it's a
The
Saturday. 3rd? Yeah.
Don't forget to wish Todd happy birthday on Sunday, because he'll make sure that you do.
Whose birthday?
Todd.
You've never met him.
I didn't. I could
I'm
still
not sure
wish
I
him
even
a happy
remember what
birthday.
it looks like.
Where is everybody?
You know what I get confused on though, Julie?
What?
Like, there's so many questions that's like, who creates the licensing laws? And then the answer is like the Board of Registration, the Board of Realtors, the state legislature, the federal. I always get confused on those types of questions.
So I got that wrong too, like that first one, but then I didn't get it wrong again because the state makes the laws and then the board enforces them.
Is it the Board of Registration or the Board of Realtors that enforces them?
Board of Registration. Forget the Board of Realtors. Whenever you hear the word realtors, it's just a trade association. That's all it is. You're gonna be required to be a member of it, being a member of this office, but it's a trade association.
That's the
There's no-
association that you pay like $800 for, right? Or something
For
like
you,
that.
yes, about 600.
She didn't get it.
Yeah. Right, okay. Anyway, where is everybody?
I told them, I said I'm the professor, and it's just me and them.
Okay, so then you're running the class today.
Hey, class dismissed. You're welcome, guys.
Thanks. Bye.
Yeah.
We're gonna have to give them lunch detentions for being late.
Mm-hmm.
Is anyone else in there? No, right?
You're late.
You're late.
I'm late, so I got the meeting just at 7 tonight,
Great.
so I'm gonna take one without me. That's why I came.
So late.
Late is late.
Early is on time is late is unforgivable. Just saying.
Now you guys both have to present the exclusive right to sell. What you got?
They were relentless.
Wasn't on, but.
Was Jessica here or not?
Yeah, I think she was getting a coffee for Lynn, so she'll be right there.
She's getting a coffee for Lily?
I don't know,
That sounds odd.
Lillian doesn't drink coffee. It's midday.
just giving the Lynn coffee, waiting.
That's so weird.
Okay, excellent. The six of us are also waiting.
Say I take mine with extra sugar.
I'm gonna go have that paper.
We stressed her out too much. She just quit.
No, that's my job.
Yeah.
I asked
Oh.
Lily if she could, we have parent teacher notes, you know, when students are late.
And where is it?
She started laughing, she was like, okay, I'll give you another note. I'm sorry.
So where's the note?
Want me to get one from her? I got her copy and Nicole, and they messed up or something, so I apologize.
Don't apologize to me, apologize to
I'm
your.
sorry, guys.
Don't worry.
We don't forgive you.
Well, I am sorry. I didn't even bring my sheet to my office.
Why don't you go get it?
Okay.
Probably an important thing.
Now you're gonna be
Alright.
extra late.
I'm sorry again, I'm sorry. I'll let everyone talk.
That'd be an expensive apology. It's terrible.
You gotta wait for the camera, not the TV. There you go. All right. Any questions from lead paint? Yesterday.
What does it taste like?
It's sweet. It's sweet.
Multiple flavors actually.
Yeah, true. True.
So Madison, explain lead paint to me in one sentence or less. What's my obligation under the law?
If you're the owner of a property built before 1978 with a child under the age of 6, you are required to create a lead compliant environment.
Right? Does everybody agree with her? Okay.
Yeah.
So Mariah, what's your obligation as an agent as it relates to lead paint? If you're representing the seller.
The seller, we have to see if they know of any lead paint. If they do, or have any documents on it, we have to provide those and put them on the list.
When you say we, what does that mean? What's your obligation as an agent
To give, what was the?
under the law, under the
CLPP.
state or federal law, the CLPPP, which stands for what, Julie?
The child protection. It's CC.
Lead paint Poison program? Is that the one?
program. Yes, that's what I was thinking of.
Okay, Mariah, not off the hook, so what's your obligation as an agent? With
We
the
have,
seller, what, in 2 sentences or less?
we have to provide that.
We have to provide that. Provide what?
The lead paint, you know?
The child protection plan,
What plan?
the CPP
CL,
CLPPP.
PPP, okay.
We have to provide that, and information goes to the buyers and the agents, all agents involved in sign it.
Okay, so your obligation as a listing agent would be that you have to provide the CLPPP, copy this entire CLPPP to the seller,
Mhm,
explain to the seller what their obligations are under the law,
mhm.
and initial that you've done that, and sign that what you're signing is accurate, to the best of your knowledge. Okay? And so what's the seller's obligation, Jonathan?
Seller's obligation is to honestly fill out that form. Saying either I have knowledge or I do not have knowledge. And if they do have knowledge, was the result compliant or not compliant? And then,
Is that what it says, Luciano? Help them out more. What does it say?
They have to say whether or not they know of any lead paint or anything, and if they've had an inspection and know of any or don't know of any inspections they have to provide all the reports attached to the.
Okay, is that exactly what it says, Julie?
Yeah, for the most part, I would say.
So, anybody want to help them out and clarify it just a little bit and simplify it just a little bit?
Which part?
The seller's responsibility.
Oh, the seller. Yeah, but you're also supposed to have the buyers aware of it and the buyer's agent aware of it.
Okay, that's not your job as the seller.
Okay,
Right.
seller, I was going to seller's agent.
What's the seller's responsibility? We're dancing around it a little bit. I'm looking for something more succinct and in layman's terms, because this is the conversation you need to be having with sellers. How
Do you-
about this? Go ahead.
Oh, do you know of any lead paint? Yes or no? If yes, how do you know?
Okay, so again, so we're chewing around the edges of it. So Mr. Seller, your house was built before, or Ms. Seller, your house was built before 1978. Here's the form that you have to disclose to the buyer what you know or don't know about lead paint, and you also have to disclose whether you have documents or have no documents. That's all the law requires you to do. Okay, remember that the lead paint law is written for owners of property for which a child under the age of 6 resides at that property. And if that's the case, what's the owner's requirement, Madison?
Sorry, guys.
Taking
If you are the owner of a property built before 1978 with a child under the age of 6, you are required to create a lead compliant environment.
Correct.
You
Okay,
have to have an inspection.
so you have to have an inspection. Do you?
Well, if there's a child in there under the age of 6.
Yep.
Then the answer to that would be they're required to inspect the property. If there's no inspection, if there's no, how else would they know if it's lead compliant?
Right, but the law doesn't say you have to go inspect. Okay, it's a nuance with a difference.
Yeah,
You can't know without an inspection, but there's no law saying you have to go inspect your property. Okay, so it's a nuance, but Jonathan, tell me what your conversation with the buyer is gonna be like. What are your obligations as an agent when working with a buyer who's contemplating the purchase of a property that was built before 1978?
they would already have this right here
Which is what packet?
that protects your family from lead in your home.
And what is that packet?
This is basically the information about what lead paint can do,
Okay,
and also where it could be found,
okay.
when you have to.
And under what law do I have to give them that packet?
I don't think you have to, I believe it's our practice to give them this packet, it's not a law.
Correct.
This packet. But in our case, because they're private, they would already have this packet, and then, if we're talking to our buyer, we would say we need to obtain this form from the seller or seller's agent.
And Mariah, what's the name of the form he's talking about?
The CPLL, no, CLPP.
the letters change every time.
that's not the form that they have to sign, is it?
Property
That
transfer.
is commonly known as the disclosure, but what's the formal name of it?
Confuses me because it's almost like the transfer one.
Yeah, the property transfer notification.
Yeah.
Say it out loud.
Property transfer notification certification.
Thank you, Mariah.
No problem.
Go ahead.
The reason that it always trips me up a little, because it doesn't know where lead is.
Okay.
You forget that that's the lead piece one.
Mhm. So we all refer to it as commonly and pragmatically as the lead paint disclosure, because that's what it is it's a disclosure. But it's called the property transfer notification, because if you notice, because we didn't talk about it yesterday, under what two circumstances is this form used?
When buying a property?
That's one of them. One's
Which
the
property?
second one.
One more time.
One's the second one.
Oh, with tenants? When a tenant's moving into a property, maybe?
Is that the form you use when a
No.
tenant moves in? Okay, so then that answer's wrong.
When, where on?
Probably something that you'll see, depending on how long you're in the business, once, twice, but probably not more than a handful of times in your entire career. I would guess. I haven't. Well, let's put it that way.
And it has to do with transfer of property.
Sure does. Julie, do you have a copy of it with you?
I don't know, would it be
Okay.
a well?
I was gonna say as cheap, like,
What's that?
I was gonna say like as Gardnerville, like property goes somewhere weird.
So Jonathan, you have it open. Why don't you read the first couple sentences at the top of the property transfer notification certification, see if it tells us anything.
This form is to be signed by the prospective purchaser before signing a purchase and sale agreement or a memorandum of agreement, or by the leasing prospective purchaser before signing a lease with an option,
What did you just say?
or by the leasing prospective purchaser.
What does that mean?
Basically means if someone's looking to lease a property, they need it.
If
At least with option owned.
Lease to own. A lease with an option to purchase.
And you don't use that often?
We've written a few over the years, but it's not common. I think it's not common because it's just not that kind of market. My guess, just based on experience, is you're gonna see lease to own options. You're probably gonna see it more in a bit of a buyer's market where somebody might come in and lease the property for a while first, and it's one way for the sellers to tie up the property without having to put it on the market and go through all of that. But you just don't see it in a raging seller's market for sure. So let's talk about that for a second. What's an option?
Option. Is it a unilateral, contract that they have the option they give the option to someone to purchase the property?
Okay, what does that mean? What's an option?
They have the option to buy it?
Are you asking me or telling me?
I'm telling you.
Oh, okay. Is she right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, technically.
Okay, so there's an option to purchase, and what does that mean? What is an option?
Basically means it's
It's,
You don't have to.
technically the lessee's choice at that point. They're leasing it, and then if they choose to, they can buy it.
They don't have to.
Okay, so, how do you think that deal gets structured?
It's probably the payments they're putting towards rent probably get added to the total purchase price at the end.
That would be illegal.
And it probably doesn't happen that way.
would that be a lease buyback?
A lease buyback. You mean a sale leaseback?
Yes, that's what I meant.
Slightly different, but a sale, so we're hitting a lot of terms that are kind of new and confusing. So a sale leaseback is typically something you see more in a commercial setting where, and where we're seeing it a lot these days is in the car dealership world. So I'm an owner of a car dealership. I own my lot and the property that the dealer's on. I'm because of the economic issues, I'm having some hard times keeping up with the ownership aspect of it. So what I do is I turn around to Jessica and I say, Jessica, I'm gonna sell you my property, but I'm gonna lease it back long-term. And what does that do for me? It gives me a quick infusion of cash, a good pile of cash for the property itself, but I don't have to pick up and move and do those things. So there's a whole cottage industry of sale leaseback. So that's a sale leaseback, again, most commonly seen in commercial world. You might be thinking of, I sell my house to somebody and I might rent it back from them for a couple days. You might see that in your residential side. Not often, but you'll see it.
Is an option something where no one, like, it's up to you and they can't make an agreement with someone else during those terms? Like if someone else,
So
they
an
would have to ask you first.
That's like first right refusal.
Well,
Right, so that would be a first right of refusal. So the option is a simultaneously signed agreement, or it's written into a lease that says, at some point in time, there will be this trigger, typically a timed trigger, that says that the lessee has the right to buy the property at predetermined terms and conditions by a certain date. So you're leasing the property from me, but you express interest in buying it. We say, okay, we're going to negotiate everything out right now, right? And we're going to agree on price. We're going to agree on all terms and conditions as to what happens. And you have, you're going to let me know by October 15th. And if you don't by October 15th, that option expires and goes away. You don't have the option to do it.
but in that time though, because they can't, well, they're actually, never mind, I guess they have the property.
The seller at that point, the property theoretically or technically under agreement. So there's a contract that's already effectively been signed, and the contract goes into effect based on the results of the trigger. The trigger being a date or some event, at which point the buyer says, yes, I am moving forward, or no, I am not moving forward. Okay, as opposed to a first right of refusal. What's a first right of refusal, Madison? Any idea?
I feel like I just studied this. Isn't that when you make an offer on a property and then no, that's not right.
Okay.
That's not right. I think pass, I don't know.
Right. Any idea?
First right of refusal, so, they get the first right to,
So
they have the first ability.
So it's a
to-
written agreement between a buyer and between a seller and a prospective buyer,
Mhm.
in which the seller agrees to first approach
Yeah.
the buyer with the ability to buy the property based on as yet to be determined prices and terms. So when we were trying to secure this land, again, I started speaking with the owners of Learning Express 7 years ago. We tried to get them, they never gave us one in writing, but we had a handshake on it that we would have a first right of refusal. When they go to sell, they're going to come to us and say, we're going to sell, do you want to buy it? And then it's, again, there isn't, unlike an option, there's not a predetermined price or predetermined terms and conditions.
Mhm.
It's just the ability to say yes, and it's up to the seller to say, here's my price, do you want it or not? And it's up to the buyer to say, the buyer has the right to refuse it first before it goes to market. Okay, but you would absolutely want both an option, which has the predetermined, pre-negotiated terms and conditions along with a trigger mechanism. You'd want that in writing. And if you had a first right of refusal, you would also want that in writing, especially if I'm the buyer. Okay. We got a little off topic. Why? Because the form that we talked about, the property transfer notification certification, is used when the property is being sold, whether it's through a direct sale, meaning you and I agree to buy and sell the property, I agree to sell, you agree to buy, or you agree to lease it with an option to purchase, meaning we essentially have a signed agreement between us for the sale of that property with predetermined terms and conditions. If it's a straight lease with no option, even if it's a straight lease with a first right of refusal, you're using a different form. You're using the tenant form. Okay, but
So-
your obligation as an agent under, got way off topic, but it's okay. Your obligation, Julie, help me out, what's the obligation of a agent working with a buyer who's buying a house under the, built prior to 1978? What are your responsibilities as the agent to that buyer?
To make sure that I give them the lead paint disclosure. So all the forms, and make sure that disclosure is in there and make sure they're aware of everything in it, what lead paint does, you know, and all the stuff associated with it, so they can make a decision on whether they want to make an offer or not.
Okay, so you're gonna give them the disclosure, assuming you have it in your hands, and we'll keep calling it disclosure, that's fine. What else are you giving them? And when?
I'm going to give them that packet that explains lead, but I'll give it to them ahead of time so they'll already have that, so
What
that we went
packet?
through it and know.
Two packets, technically?
I have it in my documents. I didn't print it out, that one.
You don't have to print it out, just
It's a lead paint packet that tells you all about what lead paint does.
The one with the blue cover?
the one that
Yes.
tells me what about all the nasty things lead paint is, or
Yes,
the one, what's the name of it? The 5-letter acronym?
that we keep changing the letters, the
I'm not
CC.
saying
I know, I am changing the letters, the
the ABCD or something like that?
Elemental P.
I know, CCPO. Oh, God.
URS?
I know, my brain is just,
CLPPP.
I'm looking for it right now so that I can. Okay. My
Repeat
goodness.
after me, everyone, please. It is the childhood
Childhood.
lead
Lead,
paint.
paint,
Paint.
Is everybody helping?
lead, I'm writing.
Poison.
All right, so childhood,
Lead poisoning prevention.
1, 2, 3, childhood.
Childhood,
1, 2, 3, lead.
lead,
A little bit behind there.
Paint,
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 poisoning,
Paint,
poisoning,
program.
program.
poisoning.
Is that a state or federal program?
It says poisoning prevention program.
Thank
Do I
you.
have a different one?
Nope, you have the right one.
Oh,
He said it wrong. He was just testing.
I
Just
think we're
testing.
driving you nuts today.
I was on that test.
Awesome. I'd rather you walk, but that's fine.
Do you see you have
Can I
to
walk? Okay.
put the CLPPP?
Paint poison program,
Okay. So it's the what?
childhood lead
Child-
paint poisoning program.
What,
Prevention.
Madison?
Childhood lead poisoning prevention
Childhood.
program.
Lead paint poisoning.
Lead poisoning prevention program. CLPPP.
And read the prevention.
Yeah.
Okay,
Oh, boy.
Doesn't sound good if you don't say the prevention part.
kind of, sort of. Okay, and so my responsibility as an agent, when I'm working with the seller, is to tell the seller that there's this thing called lead paint. Your house was built before 1978. You have to disclose, Mr. Seller, what you know or don't know about lead paint hazards in the house, and you have to tell me whether you have documentation or you don't have documentation. And we're going to document that on the property transfer notification certificate, which is the last page of the CLPPP packet, which is the childhood lead poisoning
Paint prevent.
prevention.
Program.
Stop paint, it's poisoning.
There's no paint.
You kept going, you were so confident, too. You said it like 3 times.
Well, I thought you were accepting the paint and moving on before this. You were declining.
Okay.
There's no pain in it?
Apparently not.
So back to Julie with the original question. So you're gonna give what to a buyer and when?
I'm going to give the childhood lead poisoning prevention program.
Woo! Yeah, you did it.
Finally,
First time
I have
somebody
to-
got it right.
cross out paint because we kept saying it 8,000 times. I'm going to give that packet to the buyer. As soon as if they're looking at a property or ready to make an offer, a property on a house that was built before 1978.
Okay, and what's the discussion? What are you explaining to them? If you're gonna do that, what are you explaining to them about the, property transfer notification certificate?
I'm going to explain what the certificate means and that the seller had to fill it out and disclose whether or not they know of if there's any lead paint, and then if they had any documents, and if they have no knowledge of it, to let them know that, you know, there could be, and it's up to them to do an inspection, especially if there's children under 6 going in. If they have a family or kids under 6, then they have to be compliant under the state and federal laws.
Jonathan, is there a difference between initialing and checking the document?
I would say yes. Because here you would need to initial. Somewhere like this box would be a check.
Okay.
And if it says initial there.
So does the seller initial or check? Luke,
The initial.
Jessica,
I think it depends on the question, because I think.
Madison, does the seller check or initial?
Oh, what was the seller check? Sorry.
Okay, and Mariah, on the property transfer notification certification, there is no rest for the wicked. Does the buyer check or initial there? In addition to signing, which everybody does, do they initial or check their little information in their area, in their section of the form? Are you telling me or asking me?
I think she's telling you to check.
Okay.
Both?
Both. Good answer. Thanks, Luke, for telling her.
You're welcome. I was about to say, did I tell her?
I'm checking.
So you are checking.
I am, but I'm not initial.
Next.
We can have all the fun you want with it. You get this wrong, it's $10,000, $11,000 a mistake. So if you have that kind of money, good for you. Feel free to do it wrong. Okay. Here's what will happen. The minute that you submit that form for listing, if you're listing and it's wrong, it's going to be kicked back to you and your property won't be listed. If you submit that form to closing, whether you're on the buy side or the list side, and that form is wrong, it'll get kicked back to you and your file will not be processed. Okay, so that's my safeguard for all of you in the company to make sure that it's getting done right. It's not my responsibility to make sure that they're right, but it's my responsibility to make sure that you get it done right and that you know what you're talking about. This is nasty stuff. There's lots of money. There are, you don't believe me, go Google it, but locally there has been, because of lead poisoning, somebody actually a child getting lead poisoning, there was one agent that ended up getting, I think it was $400,000 or $500,000 in civil penalties and a year in jail because they did it wrong and they didn't do it right and they were sneaky about how they went and did it and so on and so forth. So if that's what you want for your career, have at it. Don't bother doing it here. Okay?
Can
It's
you
really
repeat
important.
the answer one more time? You said that the seller checks? Or the
It-
seller
It
does?
says on here where they check
It
her.
says it right on the form. You have the
The
form with
seller,
you?
right?
Yes, do you have the form with you by chance?
Yeah, I'm just like, I just wanted to double check because then that.
Okay,
that's
so
about
I don't have it with
$10,000.
me, but under where it says seller's disclosure, it reads, thank you, it reads what? Presence of lead-based paint and or lead-based paint hazards, check 1 or 2 below.
Yeah.
See, it tells you exactly what to do. Then on B, check 1 or 2 below. Jumping down to the purchaser side of it, it says purchasers or lessee purchasers acknowledgement, initial. And then under F1, it talks, under F, it talks about the purchaser or lessee purchaser has check 1 or 2. So it tells you what to do. Don't fight the form. Follow the instructions. Okay? And those really odd examples I gave you yesterday, if it's an older house, if it's a brand new house but built on an old foundation, take the opportunity somewhere on the form to write that down. Or if there's some element of the property that was built, was built and maybe painted, sometime before 1978, but the rest of the house is new, write it down and do a disclosure. Nobody's going to fault you for doing a disclosure and taking a pragmatic and vigilant approach or a proactive approach to it. In fact, it's the law.
How many, all right,
I mean,
on average yearly, how many do you see of those forms? Since we're in Massachusetts, I'm sure a lot of properties have.
again, 80% of the housing stock. So,
Almost everything.
Yeah, I was just curious, yeah. Everything.
so it's a form you're going to see a lot of.
Yeah.
You need to be familiar with it. You need to know what your obligations under the law are. You need to know what the penalties are. Okay? What do you do, Mariah, if it's your listing and somebody hands you a buyer initialed and checked and agent signed form that has nothing on it from the seller? Cross it out and give it back to them and say, thank you, but here's the one you need to have your buyer review, initial, and sign. Okay, it's that important. It just is. Okay, jump over to the exclusive right to sell listing agreement. Does everybody have a copy? So what we will do is we'll each take a paragraph, not unlike what we did previously. And I'll ask you to read the paragraph and tell me what your thoughts are on it. And everybody can either agree or disagree, and we'll go through it. Is that okay? So the first part of the paragraph, obviously the name, the exclusive right to sell listing agreement, this is a contract. What kind of contract is it?
Bilateral.
It's a bilateral contract, but what type of contract is it?
Exclusive.
Exclusive contract. What other kind of service contract? Okay. It's between who?
Seller and broker.
Seller and broker. Who is the broker? Are you the broker?
No.
Okay, who's the broker? The broker. Okay, and the owner of the property. How do you know who the owner of the property is?
They own the title.
Beyond the title, where would you quickly reference a title?
We look it up by the deed.
Look it up with the deed. So let me ask you a question. Who wants to answer it? Who wants a nice trick question to answer? That's fun. So you'll probably know it. So the property is located in Westford. Where do you find that deed?
Not Westford. This is trick.
It's Stark County.
Oh,
Is that the answer? Or?
So the deeds are all located where? At the Registry of Deeds. And where are the Registry of Deeds located? In the counties. How many per county? Typically 2. Okay. So in Essex County, there's the Essex North and the Essex South. Essex North is in what city? Lawrence, good answer. Essex South is in what city? Salem, good answer. Middlesex North is in what city? Lowell. Middlesex South, what city? Cambridge.
oh, wow.
Suffolk. Boston.
We're smart.
What's that?
So we're smart.
You are blowing it away today. Okay?
What was the last one? That's
Boston, Suffolk was Boston.
Suffolk.
Now, you don't need to know all that to figure out who the seller is. What do you need to know?
Who's on the deed?
How do you know who's on the deed?
How do I look up the deed of the public record?
What was the second word, the second
Public
name?
record,
Public record. Where do you find public record?
MLS.
Or, is public record is kind of a generic name
Probably the registry website or
for
something.
the town, right?
Yeah,
So the town pulls information from its records in the registry of deeds, and the MLS pulls it from the town. Okay? Typically, with rare exception, although MLS can be wrong sometimes, the public record in MLS is good enough for me. It's going to name for you who the owner or owners are. And it's going to, more often than not, it will have a book and a page. There is a way to petition the registry of deeds for me to say, you know what, I know that my deed is public, but I don't want the page, the book and page published for privacy reasons. You can petition the towns and or the registries for that.
So you're actually looking at the deed is where you find the title.
The deed is the title. The title is the chain of ownership and all the documents associated with it. So when an attorney does a title run, they're not just looking at to say who's the owner of the property, but they're looking to see what liens are against the property. What is a lien? Let's go there for a few minutes.
basically something that will prevent
An encumbrance?
a transfer of ownership.
Yeah, I guess it would prevent it, I guess is the layman's way to describe it. But what is it? What is a lien?
Can you call it encumbrance?
It's an encumbrance, okay?
Money owed.
How would you describe it to me, the layman who's never heard of these terms before? You say encumbrance to me, I'm going to say, is that part of the salad? I have no idea.
Isn't it just when you owe someone money?
They default on their loan,
Yeah, typically.
If you have a mechanic's lien or
if you don't pay somebody, they say they owe money to somebody.
But it's a notice
Notice,
of a claim,
they're trying to collect.
okay?
They didn't pay.
We're talking about the different kinds of notice. So you have a mechanic's lien. Who does that? Well, you have a contractor and you don't pay them, or you have some type of dispute where you haven't paid them, they're going to slap a mechanic's lien on your title, okay? Your mortgage company puts a lien on your title the minute that you sign that mortgage and it's recorded. What does that lien say? It says, hey, if this property gets sold, you got to go through me to get there because I have a claim on this. I have a claim. It's a notice of claim on the title. Who else might have a claim on the title? Does anybody know what a municipal lien certificate is?
No, it's-
Taxes.
Police or something?
Oh,
Well,
taxes.
taxes. So taxes in and of themselves it's just called a tax lien. Why would there be a tax lien on a property?
You didn't pay them?
Okay, and which takes priority. So if I own a property, typically the first lien or lien in position one, sometimes liens are spoken about in position. Position one, almost always with rare exception, is going to be that first mortgage. And if there's a second mortgage, that becomes the second lien. If there's a third mortgage, there's a third lien. If there's a mechanic's lien, it probably goes on after those. So let's say that there's a first, second, third lien on the property, or a first and a second lien, so a first primary mortgage, a HELOC, home equity line of credit mortgage, and a mechanic's lien. All of a sudden, the town recognizes that the owner of the property has not been paying property taxes, and they file a tax lien. Where does that fall in the priority? Does it go behind the mechanic's lien because it falls in just the sequential chain of when
It depends.
it depends.
No, it's
Well,
number
I know
one.
Garbage, taxes, no.
Why is it number one?
Because it's a government power, taxes, you have to pay first no matter what.
Yep, it's called a super lien.
Go by the order of the date, right?
And then the order of the date that they were filed. So it's possible that like when I refi my house and I have a first lien and a second lien, when I go get the new mortgage, but I keep my home equity line of credit, I have to get a letter of subordination from that company to allow the new mortgage company to get the first lien on it, because if I don't, then the HELOC comes in. Let me tell you why this is important, because in But in times like 2008, when we were doing short sales, what's a short sale?
When you're underwater and you have to sell your property.
It's before foreclosure, you try to sell it before it gets closed, right?
Okay.
That's like the next step.
Okay, yeah, basically, what were you saying, sorry?
Oh, if you're under, it's usually if you're underwater and you can't pay it, the bank will approve you to do a short sale so that they'll end up getting more money from the short sale than they would for foreclosure.
So when you say I'm underwater, what does that mean?
It means that you just don't have enough money to cover what you owe for a mortgage, and you're so far below that it's just not going to cover it, even if you sold your house.
Close. What it means, a short sale is a situation where the value of the property is less than the mortgage or mortgages that are owed on the property. You typically get into a situation by virtue of what Julie was saying is because of some type of, notice the term I'm using, hardship. I've fallen into some hardship, and therefore I'm going to go to the bank and say, because of this hardship, I'm not able to pay the mortgage, and because the value of the property is less than what I owe on the property, Mr. Banker, I'm asking you to approve to let me sell the property for what I can, and you agree to take a haircut on what I owe you. Okay? I will tell you, as somebody who had been in the business for 4 or 5 years, before things, or 6 or 7 years rather, before 2007 came along, it wasn't up until Bob Boland sat at this table with myself and the then agents on a Saturday in 2006 or 5 and said, I want to talk to you about a short sale and foreclosure. And we all looked at him and said, what the hell is that? He said, it's what's happening regularly in Michigan, and it's probably going to be happening here sooner or later. So the short sale is, again, the value of the property is less than what the value of the mortgage is owed on it, and the owner of the property is approaching the bank asking for an approval. It's not guaranteed. There's a very stringent set of criteria that are required. You have to have a hardship. You can't just stop paying your mortgage and say, that's my hardship because I don't want to pay. Okay? And those can take, the first one I did and I negotiated for our seller on the bank took me 21 months. 21 months. And guess what? The bank lost $100,000 in value because it was a property over on Sagamore Drive. And the first offer we got was at, I think, $575, which was below the asking price. They refused the offer. The next offer we got 3 months later was, $550 or some stupid number. Ultimately, the number that, because they kept refusing it or not approving it, ultimately it went down to $470. Had they just approved it 20 months earlier, they would have had an extra $100,000 in their pocket. It's a big headache. It's a big hassle. It's difficult. Okay? Those are what typically will show up on Zillow as a pre-foreclosure. How does Zillow know that? It's because somebody's missed one or more payments and the lender has filed some type of public notification, which is their requirement as part of the foreclosure process to get to foreclosure. It's called forbearance.
Say we had a client that said, oh, I saw this pre-foreclosure. Can you do anything or find out info? Or...
You can. Let me ask you a question. Let me paint the picture for you. You're a homeowner. You have purposely or not purposely missed a bunch of payments. Some realtor picks up the phone and calls you and says, hey, I noticed your house is in pre-foreclosure. What are you going to tell me to do? And where should I stick it?
Yeah,
right. Okay.
Yep.
They're not easy conversations, and the education, especially as it relates to Zillow, you have to educate your buyer that, yeah, I can make those calls. Number one, I got to find out who they are. Secondly, I got to find their contact information. Third, let me ask you a question. Do you think somebody that's missed a few payments is going to have a strong desire to talk to me? Probably not.
Yeah, I thought that there may be an avenue through the bank. Okay. Because the bank is on the file. Could you contact?
The bank is only, you can, but again, have you ever called Bank of America? How often do you get somebody live on the phone? The first time I called PNC Bank, which was the bank on Sagamore Drive in 2007, I was on hold for 2.5 hours before I spoke to anybody. 2.5 hours. And I must have been transferred 900 freaking times. I had hair back then. Okay. So anyway, so I'm throwing these out because they're kind of, it's kind of stream of consciousness. We're talking about these things and they're just coming to mind, but they're terms you're going to hear. So back to the exclusive right to sell. So it's between the brokers, between the seller. You can identify the seller through getting the names through the public record. What happens if it's in a trust? What happens if it's an LLC? What happens if it's a some type of corporate entity?
You technically need all the people's signatures and you
Okay.
put the trust name there,
Okay.
the LLC's name there.
Okay. And how do you know that they have the right to sign on behalf of the trust or the LLC or anything else?
You probably have to look it up. You have to look up the trust or the LLC online, maybe.
The corporate entities you can look online. You can go to the Secretary of State's website and do a corporate database search. And it will tell you who the managers or the presidents are or the corporate officers are and who has signing authority. Trust, you can't do that. There's no database for trusts. So you would want some type of validation that they have the signing authority. Okay. And if there's more than one person, both people have to, everyone that's listed there as an owner has to sign, not just one.
What type of form would you have them show you to validate it?
I'd have them give me a verification of trustee form if it's a trust.
Yeah.
Send over a verification of trustee that you are the current trustee and that the trust you have signing authority for the trust.
Sweet.
Okay, corporate entity, I'd want to see either documentation from the Secretary of State's office, or I'd want what's called a certificate of good standing, which identifies who those people are. Okay, but be careful because there are people that will tell you that they can sign. What happens if somebody says, well, I have power of attorney? What is a power of attorney, Julie? Do you know?
Yes, they're acting on behalf of someone else. So,
Right.
But you have to have, it has to be written, a written document saying that you do have this
Yes.
power.
There has to be a copy of what's called a durable power of attorney that's signed by the person who's granting the power, identifying the person who's receiving the power to be able to do that. Yes, ma'am.
So I think my grandma must have signed it over to my dad, but she's gonna be 101 October 6th.
That's awesome.
So he's the power of attorney.
I don't know.
I think he is, but
Okay.
she must have signed something before. She has dementia now, so I'm guessing.
I would hope. Now,
Yeah.
generally, when one gets to the advanced level, so I'll talk in terms of my mother. My mother opted to do a living, what's called a living will or a living trust, which is, and we can get into the two types of trusts. There's revocable and irrevocable. Revocable means I can take it and change it and twist it and do whatever I want with it and change names on it. An irrevocable trust means I can't change it. What is a trust? In my mother's case, she took the assets that she had, the few that she had, the car, the house, and she took it out of her personal name and put it in the name of the trust. But because it was a revocable trust, that could always change. We could take those assets, she could take those assets and put them in another trust, she could put it back in her name or so on and so forth. In a irrevocable trust, you take the assets out of your name and that can never change. Okay, and it can make a difference. But anyway, so in this, what happened as my mother was setting up this living will, this revocable trust, part of the process was we identified a health proxy, we identified a power of attorney, we identified all of these things as part of those. When you get to be my age, you have to start thinking about these things and succession planning and things like that. It's part of your estate planning, and there are all of these documents. Of one, the health proxy is a document that signs, but the power of attorney, which is what we're talking about, is also signed. So I would think that if your dad has power of attorney for your grandmother, it would need to be a physical document that was signed by her and notarized. Okay? Somebody says, I have power of attorney, great, can I have a copy of it, please? Why do you need a copy of it? Because you're telling me you have authority to sign for somebody else. I need to make sure that that's the case. Durable power of attorney generally for a limited period of time for a limited types of use, right? I might give, when I go to sell my house, I might give my attorney power of attorney to sign on my behalf for that short period of time where I don't want to go to the closing and I want it to sign on my behalf. But it's limited by time and it's limited in scope. And if that closing doesn't happen, that power of attorney expires so that a year from now he can't decide, Eric didn't pay my bill. Let me go sell his house for him, right? So I'm telling you this because you're going to start encountering this stuff as you're getting people to sign documents. Okay. Paragraph 1 is simply identifying the property. The first blank line is the street address. And as you remember, not unlike when we talked in the exclusive right to buy agreement or other documents that we've talked about, it's possible that there's more than one Tremont, the street named Tremont in Boston. It might be Circle, might be Lane, might be Street, Road, whatever, but that's why we also identify in this document what it is by the book and the page, because the book and the page has what? The legal description of the property, which is unique to the property, period. Okay? So Julie, can you read 1A for me, please, and tell me what you think it means?
Yes. The broker further agrees to submit this property to the members of the multiple listing service within 1 business day, unless otherwise agreed to in writing, i.e. the coming soon and deferral of showings and or non-MLS forms.
So what does that mean?
So basically it means that once you sign this, once you agree to sell the property and sign it, that it's going to go on to MLS within 1 day. And if there's no other, nothing in writing.
Right. So the reference to coming soon and deferral of showings and non-MLS refers to MLS generated forms that are required. Because when you sign this, your agreement as a member of MLS says I am going to post any listing I have within 24 hours of the document. Okay, now remember, I can sign this document today, but the start date isn't until November 22nd. MLS is looking for it from when it was signed, not when it goes into effect. So just be ready. So in that case, you'd need one of these other documents.
And
yeah,
would that be coming soon? Because obviously Hannah needs to go and take pictures, and actually we need to write up the listing and all that stuff. So say not everything was ready to go by the next business day, do you still put it up there without pictures and it's coming soon, or how does that work?
Yeah, we take a little bit of liberty with that rule, but I generally we're going to require that you probably either have a non-MLS form or deferring of showings, or also now they have a new form called a delayed listing form, which means I'm taking the listing, but I'm going to delay putting it in MLS.
Mm-hmm.
And those have to be signed by the seller because those forms specifically state and acknowledge that we're not putting it in MLS, which is within 1 business day, which is the requirement of us as members of MLS. Okay. Madison, can you read B, please? And tell me what you think.
Okay, the seller hereby grants the broker the exclusive right to sell the above referenced property for a price of blank or such other price in and terms as the seller may approve. Seller agrees to refer to broker all inquiries about said premises to the broker and to cooperate with the broker in every reasonable way.
So break that down for me. What does that mean?
So they're saying that the seller will grant the broker exclusive rights to sell the property.
So it's me and me only, right? If you hire me, it's me and me only, or this firm only, right?
Mm-hmm. And then
Right.
list the price.
Yeah.
And then seller agrees to refer broker all inquiries. And then it's just that the broker will work with the seller and cooperate with them in every reasonable way?
Yep. And do
Cool.
what? Refer all inquiries. So if they post on Facebook that they're selling the house and somebody says, oh my God, to the seller, I'll buy your house, the seller's agreeing to give us that information.
Okay.
Great. Mariah, C.
In the event that the broker desires to show the property in cooperation with a licensed real estate agent who is working with a prospective buyer, the seller authorizes the broker to compensate the agent of any prospective buyer from the brokerage fee provided for herein and the amount to be determined by the broker. The broker must notify seller of broker's company policy regarding the payment of compensation to facilitators and buyer's agents as per the code of ethics of the National Association of Realtors, regardless of the source of buyer agent compensation. The buyer agent represents the interest of the buyer only.
Okay, so what does all that mean?
Not the broker. So it basically says that they're authorizing us to give up a percentage of the fee to the seller's agent.
So break it down by within the sentence. So the first one says that we're going to cooperate with a licensed real estate agent who is working with the prospective buyer. What does that mean?
So we're gonna cooperate with the person that's interested, the real estate agent that's interested in that.
Okay, and does that mean, do they have to be a realtor or can they be something other than a realtor? What is that?
No,
What?
licensed real estate agent.
Okay, so what's the difference between a licensed real estate agent and a realtor?
Realtors are part of the, National Association.
Okay, And-
So,
can I be a realtor without being a licensed agent?
no,
Can I be a licensed agent without being a realtor?
yes.
Okay, so there's two differences there. Okay, so just be aware of that. So what else does it say? So we're going to cooperate with them, and then it talks about compensation. What does it say about the compensation?
The seller's giving us authority to compensate the agent of the buyer,
Working with the buyer, yep.
working with the buyer, from the brokerage fee that we provided, that we give out, so either the 2% or whatever.
Okay. And what else?
And it's determined by us,
It's determined by us, and
and we must notify the seller of broker's company.
policy, right? So what is our policy? I don't know, is it? I don't know, is it?
Yeah.
Where and when? So the company policy for cooperating compensation is if the sale of the property is in the Andover, North Andover, it's 2.5%.
Okay.
If it's anywhere else, it's 2%, period. Can that be changed? Sure can. But you better have my approval on it or Lillian's approval on it, up or down. Now, what we've seen in Andover, what we're doing in Andover, because these listings are coming so fast, is we're taking advantage of the fact that these listings are coming and going so fast, and we're only offering 2% currently. That will go back to 2.5 when the market starts to normalize.
Mhm.
But it's totally up to us. It's company policy. You have an obligation to make sure that the client knows what the company policy is, period. Okay?
Mhm.
And can we tell them, do we tell them that whole thing?
Yeah, I was gonna ask you, how do you,
Andover North, Andover's 2.5, anywhere else?
Hey, I just want to let you know what that means is that we're going to take some of the commission that we're going to charge you and talk about in paragraph 2A. We're going to take a portion of that and give it to the agent working with the buyer.
We don't need to tell them.
You do, but you haven't gotten to the percentage of what you're going to charge them yet. So, right?
how would you condense that fee, like, paragraph, if you're explaining to someone quicker, or You know what I mean?
Hi, it basically says that I'm gonna cooperate with every other licensed agent that's out there.
Okay.
And we're gonna compensate the agent that brings the buyer who buys the property from the commission that we charge you.
Is there such thing as someone buying from an agent?
Of course, it's called a double-ended deal. Because then I'm gonna be the agent working with the buyer.
Oh, you're not representing.
Basically,
I'm representing the
unattached.
seller. It's an unattached buyer. But here's the nuance that you guys need to know about. Where do I offer a unilateral offer of compensation to every agent that is working with a buyer if they bring me a buyer for my listing and their buyer buys it
MLS.
in MLS? So is it possible for a real estate agent to not be a member of MLS or is it possible for an agent not to be a member of MLS?
Yeah.
Yes?
Yes.
Do we all agree?
Yes.
Madison, do you agree? Okay. Okay, so here's the next question. Take it off mute, Madison. So here's the next question.
Okay.
It says that I'm going to cooperate the other agent. Do I cooperate? Do I pay somebody different that is a member of MLS versus what do I pay somebody who's not a member of MLS? So if I go out and it's an Andover listing and we're offering 2.5% and an agent that is not a member of MLS comes and brings us in, shows the property, brings an offer, the offer gets accepted, the buyer buys the property, what do I owe that agent? That non-MLS agent?
I would say you still owe them 2.5%, but
Why do I owe them 2.5%?
Because, I mean, I might be very wrong, but you,
That's
like,
what we're
they
about
brought
to
the
find out.
buyer.
They brought the buyer, okay? But there's nothing, let me be clear, if they're not a member of MLS, there's no unilateral offer of compensation. If they didn't write it in the offer, I don't owe them a dime. Now, would it make smart business, practical sense for us not to compensate that agent? Probably not. But we have done something similar. We had a situation in Lexington where we offered 2% out. The agent working with the buyer was an attorney. He also decided to play buyer's attorney, and he was just a jerk. He was just a nasty, miserable human being. And so we made the decision that we weren't going to compensate him 2%, which is what we were offering in MLS, and we decided to compensate him 1%. And so on the day of closing, we get this very, very nasty email followed by a very, very nasty call about what bad people we are.
This was recently, right? A couple of
No,
years?
that was this.
I feel like I remember something like
There might have been another one, sorry. And so the conversation went like this: you owe me 2%, that's what you had in MLS. Eric's response: okay, are you a member of MLS? No, then why do I owe you 2%? Because that's what you're offering, but you're not a member of MLS. But that's what you're offering. Well, we can do this all day long, but we're only going to pay you 1%. Well, why would you only pay me 1% when you're going to pay somebody else 2%? Because you've been a flat out jerk. And if you keep it up, I'm going to actually not pay you anything. Well, you can't do that. Okay, try me. Sue me. 3 hours later, I had a 93A demand letter from another attorney. 2 hours after that, I had a response to him, and we never heard from him again. Why? Because we paid him what we said we were going to pay him, which is 1%. We never backed off of that, although in retrospect, I probably should have had a spite. But 2, in our response to the 93A demand letter, we said basically the following: we are realtors, you are not. We have an obligation to cooperate, and we're doing that. Cooperate doesn't mean that I have to compensate you. The only time that I have to compensate somebody is when I'm saying I'm making a unilateral offer of compensation through MLS to other MLS members, of which you're not a member. So tell me where in the contract it states that we owe you money. Or what contract is there or agreement is there between my firm, my broker of record, and your broker of record that says we're going to pay you? There is none. So take the 1% and be happy. If not, feel free to take me to court and we'll see who wins. Okay, so I don't expect you to know all the stuff, but I share this stuff with you because this is what the world breeds. in our business, right? There's a lot of insufficiently minded individuals out there. Moving on, the most operative thing here is regardless of the source of buyer agent compensation, the buyer agent represents the interest of the buyer only. What the hell does that mean? Who wants to tackle that? Sorry, I'm just waiting on an offer. Through.
So regardless of where the money comes from, it's being paid to the buyer's agent,
So you're on the right track.
we protect our client. We work in the best interest of our client, even if our money is coming off of their.
Well, yes, let me twist it a little bit differently. The buyer agent can get paid from a number of, right? You as a buyer agent can get paid from a number of places, right? You can get paid by your client, the buyer. You can get paid in full by the listing agent or a representative of the seller or the seller themselves, or you can get paid through a combination of the two of those. Does my representation change just based on who's paying me? No. My representation is established by the agency that I create with the individual. And if there's a contractual relationship, which there ought to be if I'm representing somebody, it's defined as to how I get paid in that agreement. I can go work with a buyer who has hired me under a buyer agent exclusive right to buy agreement and never get a bloody cent for them, but get all the money from the seller. But who did I represent? The buyer. So representation does not equate to compensation. So we're just calling that out and making sure our clients know that. Jessica D.
Once a purchase and sale agreement has entered into by the seller and been signed on the property herein named as noted in the multiple listing service as under agreement, the seller hereby acknowledges that the broker has no obligation to market the property and or present further offers to the seller. So he's basically saying once something's under agreement, he doesn't have any further duty to market the property or present new offers once something's in agreement.
Correct. Now, we have a legal obligation to present all offers, and we will.
Okay.
But the reason why we say it that way and we use the term under agreement is in our company, our process is that once the purchase and sale is signed, we change that status to under agreement, which is considered an off-market status in the MLS, which means we're technically not marketing through MLS, which means that it's no longer being promulgated out to the rest of the world, the Zillow's Realtor.com as an active property. Okay. On our website, we'll probably keep it out there. Have I gotten offers after a signed purchase and sale? It's rare, but it happens.
And you present those.
You have to. We do. We tell them we're not going to, but we have to by law.
So if there's, you know how you've been talking about like there's open houses and they need to like get their offers in by noon or something like that?
Yeah.
So say an offer comes in they know of and like at once, let's just say, or two.
Mm-hmm.
Do they by law have to show them, even though like the deadline was 12?
What does the law say?
Or not law.
What does the law say about presenting offers?
You have to present all of them.
When?
Oh,
Forthwith, meaning immediately,
right.
right? So even though I'm collecting, we have an offer deadline at 12 noon on Friday, I get an offer today, I'm presenting that offer to the seller.
Okay, and we do it because we follow the rules, but do other people not do it? Do you know what I mean? Like
There may be
kind of what I
some.
was getting at. Like, because I remember you had that situation where you wanted to put an offer in before an open house, or no, someone was trying to write an offer, but there was like a deadline. I don't know. I can't remember what the scenario
Right.
was, but.
Yep, go ahead.
Similar to her question, the deadline is 12. And something came in at 2, we would still present it.
I have to.
Have you ever seen one of the other people that made an offer make an argument that you can't, you have to put priority on my offer because we met the deadline and that person didn't? So it's more of like a request and a preference, but if someone does it after the deadline, they can still be accepted. And
Well, it has to get presented, whether the seller accepts it or not, it's up to the seller. If they've already signed another offer, what's the point? But you still have to present it.
And once the seller signs that offer,
Mhm.
they have an obligation to move forward. They just can't say, oh, wait, never mind. Like, That's.
Well, can somebody change their mind? Of course they can change their mind. The question is what's in the contract and what allows them to either get out of it or not? Have deals dissolved without any ramifications, even though that's not what the contract said? Sure.
Mhm.
It's rare.
But the buyer could say, this is a contract for you to perform.
Sure.
I mean, they don't have any deposit on the line, but they're just forcing to perform.
And how would they do that? Through suing for specific performance if they didn't perform.
Mm-hmm. If they decided to try to take a higher offer after signing the contract.
That'd be problematic.
Yeah.
Be very problematic.
Why with rentals does it not go to under agreement on MLS right away? For example, for Doncaster, Chris was explaining that it doesn't go to under agreement right away like it does for a house.
It doesn't go right away to under agreement for a house.
Okay.
Okay, so your status is an
Or
MLS
contingent rather.
contingent, which
Right.
is different than under agreement.
Right, so there's no like contingent for a rental, is that why?
Should be. If we have something in writing,
Mhm.
like an application, we'll generally put it as contingent. We can. There's no hard and fast rule as to what you do.
Okay.
There are guidelines.
Okay, because I know that or as of this morning, it was still active, which is why we're still getting calls. But I know it isn't a bad thing because we can possibly get these up, but I was just.
Right, but if we haven't accepted, if we haven't accepted application, we should be putting it as CTG. That's just not fair or reasonable to
Okay.
people out there, in my humble opinion.
Right. I was just wondering, so in case we were asked that question by, like, the person that I don't think it's gonna go anywhere, but she said.
Because
well,
I don't-
it's active.
Right, it still says active because I don't have anything in writing from both parties, signed by both parties, saying that there's an accepted letter of intent or an acceptance of an application. There's a handshake, and they're honoring the handshake, their intent is to honor that handshake, but until we have something in writing, and in the case of a rental, it's a lease signed by both parties, it won't change until UAG.
Mhm. And we can't allow them to submit an application just in case it doesn't go.
They can certainly submit an application, but it's probably an exercise in futility.
So when I called her yesterday and said, unfortunately, it's no longer available, should I have still given her the option to, do you want to?
You're way overthinking this.
I know, I usually do.
Okay, so I'm just letting you know, you're way overthinking it.
Mhm.
Why would you do that?
I don't know if I was obligated to give her the option because it wasn't technically.
Again, don't conflate legal with MLS, two different things.
Okay.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, so I think I did it correctly. I said it was no longer available.
Right.
So what was
Right, you're being truthful and honest, you have a requirement under the law to be fair and honest.
Yeah.
So you're being fair and honest.
that? Okay. Yeah, I don't
They
think.
may not like it, that's a different issue.
Yeah, she declined my call from that. I could tell.
She's ghosting you.
Yeah.
Okay.
It wouldn't be the first time.
All right, so let's keep going. So the seller agrees to pay broker the following fees. A, professional brokerage and marketing services a fee of 6, 7, 8, 9, 10% of the agreed upon sales price. Why do we have 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10 pre-printed in there? Why do you think?
The amount of work that's going into it, advertising, I don't know.
That's part of it.
Well, because the lowest amount is the one that we really want. The highest amounts make it look like we're giving them a good percent, but the higher ones are often used for commercial.
Or land,
Yeah.
Okay.
or corporate. So, 7 and 8 is used for corporate relocation, which we don't see a lot of anymore. Land is generally 10% raw land. If it's not raw land, if it's land that's been approved with permits and stuff, it might be 7%, 9%. In other words, you can make it whatever you want. The company policy is at 6%. You can discount down to 5. If you discount down to 5 or something that's not here, cross them all out, write the new percentage in, and initial it, and have the person signing the document initial it. Anytime there's a handwritten change on a legal document, there better be initials next to it of both parties. Otherwise, it's not a legal document.
How often does, just a normal, residential listing, compensation higher than 6%, not normal?
I'd say it's a handful of times in any given year. Okay?
And you said 9 to 10 was usually commercial?
9 to 10 is usually commercial. Yep. But again, it depends on the type of commercial.
I have a question on the discounting of the commission. So if we discount it down to 5%, or if we discount it down to 2.5%, is the split between broker and salesperson still 50-50, or since we took it down to 2.5, is that us losing?
No, your split is your split with the company. The only time that there's a differential is if you make it an unapproved discount. So you, instead of going to 2.5, you go to 2, or you go to 4 on a listing, then you're going to make up the difference.
Yeah.
For what your split is, right? If it's an unauthorized, unapproved, in advance discount,
Okay.
then we reserve the right to charge you back for the amount that you discounted without our approval.
Okay.
Okay?
In your practice, when you end up doing both, I asked you about this the other day, when you have someone that's going to sell their home with you and going to buy a home with you.
Yep.
In your practice, when you discount that, I know you said you do sometimes,
Yep.
2.5 and 2.5, or do you ever go lower than that on both?
No.
Or one or the other?
Can also lower.
Okay. Yeah, major pushback from my household is very opinionated doing that.
What does he want on that?
Yeah, so let's talk about it. Use it as an example and let's learn from it.
Well, yeah, and I wish I went more into it with him, but my main focus I was actually talking to my cousin's fiance, because they bought a house that they're planning on selling, and for capital gains tax, you have to have the residential property for the
Minimum 2 years.
2 years.
2 and 5 years.
So they want to sell it in 2 years, and they're talking to me about it. He was asking me about examples of how commissions work, and I used an example. I said, for example, if a commission was 6%, he said, like, how much do you get paid? If you get paid the full, like, percentage, if I hire you myself as my listing agent. And I said, no, I do not get all that. For example, if it is 6%, and he didn't even bat an eye, we were just using it as an example. My uncle from the other end of the table yelled, 6%, I would never pay 6%. I would never let you pay 6%. That's way too much. And I kind of just dismissed it, and I actually said something like slightly smart, but I just said, yeah, we had 20,000 people pay it. And then I just turned back to him because I just didn't want to deal with it at the time. And I was talking to a different person who didn't care to make a big deal about it. And that conversation went fine. But when we went back to his subject, he said, yeah, I just had my realtor list my house for 4% and took it, whatever the listing agent was offering on this house. So I didn't pay anything to buy this house, and I paid 4% to list my house. I wouldn't pay anymore.
Mm-hmm. Great. So you're not happy when you pay peanuts. You get monkeys.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not willing to charge less than 5% because I know what I want.
Yeah, it was unfortunate because I know that he had. Oh, they like to not talk about the specific.
Yeah. Hey, great. So
opportunities, but
hey, Uncle, remind me what you do for a living.
He owns a machine shop.
He owns a machine shop. Okay, and does he have standard rates that he charges for manufacturing things?
Oh yeah.
Okay. Are you willing to discount that fee?
Oh no.
Okay, why not? Because I know what the cost of my raw materials are. I know what the cost of my labor is. I know what the cost of, because I'm a smart, pragmatic business owner. I know what my costs are, and I don't know what the value is that I bring because I make the best widgets in the world. Awesome. How is my fee any different?
But it's hard to, so this is someone that he's been working with for a very long time. He's become like friends over it because he has also investment properties and commercial property and all this stuff. And when I was first got hired here, he said, you know, I always thought I would never leave my realtor, but now that my nephew said, because we do have a good relationship beyond these like smart comments sometimes.
Yep.
So now that my nephew is a realtor, I would really have to consider thinking of using you.
And I appreciate that.
Right. And now this is weeks later that saying something like this. So even though he was nice enough to say that before he made anything about commission, it's going to be a very hard.
You know what's really interesting is we've worked with dozens upon dozens of builders for which we've sold thousands of their homes. They've all been charged 5%. And why do you think that is? Why do you think that a builder who is giving me multiple units is willing to pay 5%?
They believe that you get it sold for at least 1% higher.
Right. And it's all about the value proposition, Uncle. It's about what you think. You know, if you don't think I'm worth 4%, then I haven't done a good job of convincing you that I'm worth more than 4%.
And that's what I ended up explaining to my cousin's fiance, is that it really has to do with how much money you net in the end.
Mhm.
So, because then he asked, well, for sale by owner.
Mhm.
And I said, the concept is that we will net you more than if you sold it by yourself. So, for example, I told him, for example, you can sell it for $500,000, we can sell it for $550,000, then you made more money. And he made perfect sense to me, so that makes sense, because I don't think I'd be able to sell it for as much as you did.
Right, because what happens with a for sale by owner? They go to work, the phone rings, and they miss a phone call that could have been the one buyer that would have paid the premium for them.
Mm-hmm.
So they've effectively taken their house off the market when they went to work.
Mm-hmm.
Isn't that awesome?
Yeah. So just thought it was interesting because mine was quite experienced in buying and selling. He has such strong opinion that
Where do they live?
difficult. He just moved. Oh, this is different. Sorry. I should
Oh, I
have
thought it was
clarified.
the same
I
uncle.
should have clarified. Now, that's my great uncle in Texas. This is my uncle that lived in Wilmington for a long period of time and just moved to North Reading.
Give them a tour of the office. Get them through that front door and
Yeah.
you'll have 5% all day long. It's
I hope
true.
so. Yeah, so, yeah.
So I can
But
probably
so-
name the builders the names of the builders we've represented, he probably knows. But again, I come back to the fact that if somebody has 100 units that we're gonna sell for, and they're willing to have me listen for 5%, why wouldn't you?
Yeah.
Right? And you're right, it comes down to what do you net at the end of the day?
Mm-hmm.
Because if I'm a better negotiator and I can net you more money, if I can net you 2 or 3 or 4% more than the average agent, you go and work with the average agent, you're getting that 1% discount, that 1 point discount, but you're also leaving on the table the other 2 or 3 points that I would have been able to negotiate for you.
Mm-hmm.
So it is about what you put in your pocket at the end of the day.
Yeah. I'm becoming more comfortable talking about those things, but it was such.
You got it. That was your stuff, right?
It'll be a lot easier too, once you're really familiar with all the marketing and everything that we offer.
Mhm.
It'll be a lot easier to convince people, because the hardest people to convince are your relatives, because they're the ones who are most open to having those negative comments towards things like that.
Because they will speak freely and they
Yeah.
expect that you're going to do something for them.
Yeah.
All right, so I'm going to blow through some of this real quick. So during paragraph 2A1, during the term of this agreement, a buyer is procured, ready, willing, and able to buy said property or any part thereof for the price named herein or for any other price or upon any other such terms as may be acceptable to the seller through the efforts of anyone, including the seller, as evident by a written and signed offer. What does that mean? That means that you're going to owe me a fee when we procure a buyer who's ready, willing, and able to buy your property and they meet the terms and conditions that are acceptable to you. And guess what, Uncle Bob? If it's your neighbor who came and said, I want to buy the house from you, you still owe me a fee. Why? Because it says right here, through the efforts of anyone, including the seller, as evident by a written and signed offer. I will enforce that by legal means. I'm in the process of doing it now. We have a client of ours who has decided in their infinite wisdom that we owe them a fee because they brought the buyer to the table. Doesn't work that way. And so I have just filed a suit in the circuit court, followed by a 93A, because they're a licensed person. We'll see what happens. I know what the answer is going to be because I've been through this before. And I know that this contract will hold up in court. 2, in the event the seller defaults. What does default mean?
Can't pay their mortgage. Or they-
The seller defaults. What does default mean in a contractual relationship?
They don't have to hold up their end of the.
They breach is another word. They break the contract or get out of the contract or try to get out of the contract for reasons that are not allowed or specified. Okay, so if the seller defaults and is unable to complete the transaction as dictated in a fully signed offer to purchase real estate or purchase and sale agreement, broker is entitled to its commission as stated above. That fee would be due and payable upon the termination of this contract unless otherwise authorized by the broker. So in other words, you go out and do your job and get the property listed, you get offers, you negotiate an offer, whether it gets to the purchase and sale or not, the seller defaults, meaning they breach the contract and do not move forward with the sale, you get paid, we get paid.
What if they default and then that buyer says, all right, screw it, I'm just gonna go buy something else, and then they end up going through with another buyer, and you get the fee from that?
Technically, a contract's not terminated, so they won't owe you the fee yet until it's terminated, right?
Well, if there was a breach by the seller who broke the contract between them and the buyer not to buy, the question for me then becomes, Mr. Seller, why'd you break the contract? One, you owe me the fee. Two, why'd you break the contract? And if you're still looking to sell this, what's going to stop you from breaking the contract again?
Mhm. So you would say,
So the likelihood that your scenario is going to happen is about 0 to none. Because if they're breaching the contract to get out of a contractual binding agreement, knowing they're going to get sued, because that's what's going to happen,
Mhm.
do you think they still want to sell the house? Probably not. Hasn't happened, but in 20 years. Not to say you can't.
Could they get sued by the buyers when you have
The buy, yeah, they're breaching the contract. They're breaking the contract, unilateral breaking of the contract in a way that they're not allowed to. This buyer's going to come after them for specific performance. You agreed to sell me this based on these terms and conditions. You're now acting in bad faith. Your intent is bad. You've broken the contract. I'm suing you for breach of contract. Okay. 3, in the event that property is dual listed for lease and then is subsequently leased without being sold, and then the lessee then purchases the property anytime thereafter, the seller shall pay the broker the fee. So in other words, there has to be 2 documents signed by the seller, exclusive right to lease agreement and an exclusive right to sell agreement, which is possible. And if there's a lease that goes into effect and then that buyer buys it, as long as those 2 preconditions occurred, then the seller's going to owe us a fee. Because we still sold the property. Again, that paragraph is in there because that actually happened to us. We had it for lease, we had it for sale. We didn't have this language that tied the 2 together. We leased the property, the seller turned around and sold it to the lessee and skirted around our fee.
How did you find out that they had done that, like they sold?
Because we stay in touch with people.
Yeah, no, you have to keep on people then.
Of course.
So is that like an indefinite thing, or is there like a time that ends? Like if someone leases a place and then 3 years later they just happen to end up buying it?
That's what the situation was here. It was like 3 years later, and we said, yo, it's a fee. And the seller was like, and we leased it to him 3 times. We're like, but we introduced it to him. If it weren't for us, that lessee would never have signed a lease, much less purchased the property. And they said, well, you might be right, but your contracts don't say that. So we have the contracts rewritten. Okay.
So if someone has like a 5-year lease and then dies, you still get paid?
That would be, yes,
Wow.
And you would get the commission from the lease, and you would get the full commission from the.
sure would, as long as I have a exclusive right to lease agreement and exclusive right to sell agreement.
I feel like if you have so many deals, you like lose track of.
I won't lose track of money, trust me.
No, I know. It's just good to know to pay attention to.
Ask Tyler, because Tyler signed a listing agreement in 2011 on Milton Ridge. We granted the seller, we gave them, because on the first deal, they were really tight on their money, the cash flow. We said, all right, we're going to give you, we'll waive $2,500 of our fee, but you owe us on the last sale. Last sale is now 9 years later. I haven't forgotten about it. The seller has, but I haven't.
Well, so how does that work with the protection period, the 120 days? If they, in that 120 days after, if they sign with another agent,
But they didn't.
oh, so if they did, then.
Well, if they did, now you're getting it. But again, I'm going back to the fact that we introduced them to the property,
Yeah.
right? Is it shaky language? Probably. Is it enforceable in court? Who knows? But what I find is at least it's going to raise the question at the beginning, or at least it gives me some leverage to go lean on somebody to pay us.
So maybe in the future, if they remember that, then they'll just come to you and let you know before trying to do it right.
Where are we? We're running tight on time. Retained deposit. If any deposit is retained by the seller as liquidated damages for default by the buyer under the agreement for sale of the property, the broker shall be due 1/2 of the amount of so retained, one half of the amount so retained, but not more than an amount equal to the full commission that would have been paid broker if sale had been completed. These funds are due and payable upon the authorized release of escrow monies from said. What does that mean? So that's the reverse. That's, you have a purchase and sale agreement or an offer to purchase, and the buyer breaches the contract. So in most buyer contracts or most agreements, buyers typically have one of two outs. They have the out through a typical home inspection clause. They have the out through a financing commitment. Now, you can't just back out of the deal and get your lender to say, oh, they can't get financing if they really can, because that's called mortgage fraud. But let's say the buyer throws up their hand and says, I'm not doing this. And they've broken the contract. That means that their deposits are going to be kept more than likely by the seller. If the seller retains the deposit, the seller owes us half. We've had it happen once in 20 years. The situation goes like this. The property over on Apple Blossom Street in 2001. The buyer bought the property not through our office, but was buying the property at a house to sell contingency. The buyer ultimately backed out of the deal. I'm trying to remember the specifics, but backed out of the deal, citing the fact that they couldn't sell their house, but that really wasn't the case. They had their house under agreement. They just didn't want to move forward with the sale. The buyer and the seller went to court, right? Because in a breach, the buyer, so the seller's remedy, the buyer's remedy when a seller breaches is to sue for specific performance. A seller's remedy when a buyer breaches to retain the deposits that have been collected. Okay, so they went to court. Part of the reason why the language, our escrow language, has changed is because Lillian got dragged in for a deposition, so there was 8 hours of her time one day in front of a bunch of attorneys, including our attorney's time. Then Eric got slogged in for another 8 hours of deposition with an attorney. So we went through all this process. Ultimately, the court decided to split the deposit. So you had a $30,000 deposit. Seller got to keep $15,000. Buyer kept the other, got $15,000 back. We went to the seller and said, hey, Mr. Seller, just want to let you know, we'd like to sell your house. We'll actually waive our rights to this fee. And he started threatening to sue us that he didn't owe us a fee. He said, but I'm not going to continue selling the house with you because he felt it was our fault. So we said, okay.
See you in court.
See you in court. And we ended up with an $8,000 check, basically, because we were entitled to that deposit. Now, I will tell you, I don't want to earn fees by retaining deposits. The question that we always ask, and there's maybe been one other potential situation that even got close to this, I don't want to, listen, all I want to do is earn my fee by selling your house. If I sell your house, the only other situation we had it, we said, if we sell your house, we won't weigh claim to that half a deposit. And we put that in writing to the seller. No problem. Okay. Administrative fee. Let's read that one together. Administrative fee. Luch, why don't you read that one for us?
An administrative fee of $395 is owed to the broker at closing as there's owed broker.
Owed broker at closing.
Is owed broker at closing as the broker has contracted a third-party platform to allow the seller to schedule showings and the ability to view posted activity and feedback related to their listing via the internet at all times. The fee also covers additional administrative services to include, but not limited to, arranging for and attending inspections, such as smoke appraisal and other inspections, document production, attorney interaction, contingency management, as well as for ongoing and off-site document storage and other retention services as required by state and federal regulations.
So a lot to break down there. How long does the company need to retain business records?
7 years.
7 years. So if you want to come with me one day, I'll bring you over to North Andover, where I've got the last 7 years of real estate transactions for the company. And every year, as Luch will know, I think you may even help me one year. We load up the truck, we go over there, we take out the oldest year, put it back in the truck, take the newest year, put it in there, bring the old stuff back, and then we shred it. Okay, so there's a cost associated with that storage, so that's part of it. What's the other cost? Well, there's a variety of them. Number one, everybody's going to look at that and say, administrative fee, I'm already paying you 6%. You're paying me 6% for my marketing and my ability to get things done. I've hired a team to do all these other things, a lot of things that you won't get from other brokers. From other brokers, you may or may not get a third-party scheduling service that has an app that allows you to manage the whole showing and manage feedback and all of that. What I also know is that you don't have any other agent in the area that's going to schedule your smoke inspection, attend your smoke inspection, meet the appraiser at the house. That's all going to fall on you. What's your time worth? Okay, so the administrative fee is far from even a small dent in the process. If you think about what Hannah does and what Pam does. So Hannah on average spends, Luch, you clarify for me, the average listing was going to take anywhere from 6 to 8 hours of just work.
At least.
At least.
I mean, it's easily an hour and a half to 2 hours at the property, another full day doing the stuff, add up all the open house times, all that stuff. I mean,
So maybe
for
take to
scheduling,
10.
over the whole listing, it's probably 15 for every listing.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, and then it's at least that with Pam. So there's 30 hours, at least 30 hours of administrative time on every listing to get it all the way to close. There is not another Pam around here. There are transaction managers that will help manage a purchase and sale, but there are no other Pam that does what Pam does and provides the service that she does and follows up with the attorneys and coordinates appraisals and do all this. That's what the administrative fee is for. Please do not get in the habit of waiving it, because if you do, I might start charging you back. Okay? It's a small offset to a very large expense for us. Okay? Now, it's an expense that we choose to do. That's our business model. One could argue, well, shouldn't you just charge more commission? Well, I start charging more commission, I'm gonna have even more difficult conversations with your uncle. Okay, so that's why we chose to break it out. And, you know, if I get $400, somebody do the math. What's $400 times 400 transactions?
$160,000.
I would hope that we get it on every transaction that we do that we're gonna close this year. Last year we closed 300, let's call it 300. So 300, that's 100 and what, 20,000? Roughly speaking.
Yeah.
Right? So let me tell you, that doesn't quite cover the salaries of people to do what we've asked them to do for you. Not even close. Okay? So just, that's what it's for. Moving right along, protection period. In the event the property or any part thereof is sold within 120 days after the term of this agreement, meaning the expiration date of the agreement, or any extension thereof, to anyone who was introduced to the property, they're the operative words, introduced to the property through the listing office or cooperating agent, the corresponding fees are due and paid and payable immediately. However, if during the term of such a protection period, a valid, written, exclusive right to sell listing agreement is then entered into with another licensed real estate broker, the seller shall not be obligated to pay such a commission. Additionally, the seller represents that the seller is not subject to any earlier agency agreements with any broker or is not subject to other listing protection periods. Ours is about the only Massachusetts form that has a protection period like this. So you may encounter other people, particularly expired and canceled. You want to ask the question, but they're probably going to scratch your heads and go, I don't know what you're talking about. Okay, it's basically saying that, hey, if our agreement expires and somebody that we introduced to the property during the term of the agreement comes back to you personally and buys the property, we're still owed a fee because we introduced it to them. It's a little hard to fathom, so that it doesn't. I've seen it attempted once or twice.
It's usually with builders. I feel like with new construction.
It's certainly certain types of builders. Okay. Reimbursements. The seller agrees to reimburse a broker for all fees incurred by the broker on behalf of the seller that are required by law. That would be the smoke detector inspection, the 6D certificate, so on and so forth, as well as those that may be incurred outside of this agreement with the seller's knowledge and approval. Reimbursement will occur as outlined in paragraph F below. So all this is saying is that if I put money out for a smoke inspection or a 6D, you're going to agree to pay me back. If there are other things that we choose to pay in advance on your behalf, Mr. and Ms. Seller will get your approval for it first. Any of those fees that are reimbursable to us fall under paragraph F, which basically says that the seller hereby authorizes Lily Montalto Signature Properties to reflect any and all fees on the closing disclosure and or Alta settlement statement at the time of closing, thus making any and all fees as noted in this agreement and related to this property due and payable from either the amounts held by the broker as the escrow agent and or the proceeds of closing of the aforementioned property. Additionally, any such fees of no or noted obligations not paid at time of closing shall survive the delivery of the deed. That just says if you don't pay us, you still owe us. Okay. Next, additional terms and conditions. The term of the agreement. This agreement will be effective starting on a start date and will remain effective through and including an end date at midnight and may extend by mutual agreement of the parties named herein as evidenced by the seller's signature on the MLS Property Information Network status change form authorizing the extension of the expiration date. So in other words, you don't need the seller to authorize, to extend this agreement by signing this agreement. They can do it by signing the status change form, which is a form which certainly knows that we often use to extend. We use it for price changes, we use it for extensions, and so on and so forth. And we do that because once, many, many years ago, we didn't have that language in here, and even though the seller signed that extension in MLS, their argument was it wasn't part of the contract, so screw you, I'm not extending it, and I'm gonna go list with somebody else. So lots of stuff in this very custom contract are the result of our wonderful experiences over the years, designed to protect you and us. You need to get the following approvals from the seller. So we are asking the seller further agrees to grant permission to the broker to place a for sale sign in the above described premises. Why? Because 50% of the up calls and inquiries on a property come from signs planted in the yards, believe it or not. Why else? The signs are a very good indication that the house is for sale. And some people, not everybody has a GPS. Most people do, but some people try to drive by and figure out the property, and it's hard to figure out the number of a property on a house at midnight when the lights are off. To provide a seller's statement of property condition to the broker, or also known as a seller's disclosure. Is that required by law?
No.
No, but we're asking them to do it anyway. To allow the property to be shown in MLS, to MLS participants on tour, that means broker caravan if there is one. To complete a lead paint disclosure. Complete the mandatory licensee consumer relationship disclosure form. Sound familiar?
Mm-hmm.
To grant permission to take interior and exterior photographs of the property, to place photographs on the broker's website, to provide a key to the property during the duration of the listing. To the property will be marketed at our discretion. That doesn't mean you can't have a conversation with your seller and grant your seller's request that they want some type of additional advertising, but if it involves a cost, make sure you've spoken with me first, or Lily. But wait, there's more. Seller acknowledges that in addition to the above referenced property being promoted on the broker's website, the broker, at its sole discretion, may also employ the use of third-party website marketing services such as Zillow, Realtor.com, etc., which obtain property information from the MLS or other public sources other than the broker and or the seller. The seller holds the broker harmless for inaccuracies posted on such websites and further acknowledges the limited control asserted by the broker over such websites. However, the seller agrees to notify a broker of such inaccuracies. Again, what happened? In its infancy, before there was Zillow, there was only Realtor.com. And we had a mistake because the algorithms read the information wrong. Mm-hmm. We had a seller threaten to sue us and do all these nasty things to us. And we kept saying, it's not in our control, it's not in our control. So we use this to explain it's in our control. We will do what we can, but that is also why we have every seller give us some type of written approval that they've reviewed the MLS information. Okay? You too, as agents, will also need to sign off and or approve the listings before they go to the seller. Because if you inadvertently don't ask whether or not the seller owns or rents the hot water heater, you mark own, you approve it, the seller then approves it, we sell the house, we're at closing, and it's found out that the hot water heater is leased, you, not we, are buying the new buyer a brand new hot water heater for your mistake. We've bought several of them over the years. It ain't
And
fun.
refrigerators.
And refrigerators, thank you.
So you're just saying have them write in all those things instead of us mark it up.
That would be a wise thing to do, but you are signing off on the accuracy of the listing on MLS and in the feature sheet.
Once Hannah completes the whole listing and is ready to push it live, before she pushes it live, she'll show it to you as the agent to make sure that you're totally fine with it. And then you or her forwards it to the sellers, gets their approval, and then she pushes it live.
Because the last thing I'm gonna allow you to do is say it's Hannah's fault. Not Hannah's fault. Hannah's doing a service for you. Yes, she needs to get it as accurate as possible, but your job is to audit it and make sure it is accurate. If you sign it, you own it.
And if, say we ask them, hey, is that leased or is that owned water heater? And they say, oh, I own it. Do we need to get documentation showing that they own it? Or do we, you know what I mean? Because it will
You're
be,
overthinking it again. If they sign off on it, they sign off on it.
You think
Right.
what if they lie?
well, yeah, what if they allow you so that
It's not
would
your
be fine?
problem.
It's not your problem.
If
They
they
don't
allow,
fraud. They got a bigger problem.
Okay.
Lockbox. The lockbox is or is not authorized to attach the broker is or is not authorized to attach a lockbox to be used by the purpose of the story keys during the term of this agreement. Seller acknowledges that the lockbox is not a security system, agrees to release and hold harmless to the broker and any agents or facilitators or broker from any liability whatsoever arising from the use of the lockbox. Never once had a problem with a lockbox being accessed or having a key stolen or people accessing a house without authorization. But there is that risk. Okay. Cancellation. Seller cannot cancel this listing unilaterally because the seller recognizes that the broker or the agent will render services and incur expenses in connection with the marketing of the property. This contract shall be binding upon execution by the seller or seller's agent and broker and can be canceled only if the seller and broker agree in writing. Additionally, the seller agrees that if the broker releases seller from the agreement, the broker at its sole discretion may bill seller for services rendered and expenses incurred up to the time of said release in connection with the marketing of the property. Not my favorite thing to do, but I will do it. Because sometimes sellers make decisions that there's a personality conflict, they don't like what we've done, and now they want to cancel the listing and go list it somewhere else. Well, you can't wake up tomorrow, Mr. Seller, and just say, I want to fire Eric today. I mean, you can, but legally, you can't. There is not another cancellation clause in any contract that I've seen of your competitors locally. But be aware of this. Because, and remember that you are not the broker. You cannot cancel a contract, even if it's your client. That has to be approved by Lillian or I, and signed by Lillian or I.
Did they say that because this is and, that we couldn't actually cancel them?
Let me tell you what, if I want to fire somebody, we're firing somebody. And they want to fight me against the contract, go ahead. I'll have them spend more money on an attorney in about a week than they can possibly imagine. Could they? Sure.
I'm also thinking about the buyer side, because I know Michael had to let a buyer client go.
We're saying that the client cannot unilaterally make the, right? We didn't specify in here that we can't unilaterally. Could you make the argument that it says the word and, Eric? You're right, it does. I'm not going to argue with you there. But what are you going to do? How are you going to make me, if I decide that I don't want to work with you and you're the seller, I cancel your listing out of MLS, what are you going to do? You're going to go sue me now? Go ahead. I'll tie you up so fast you have no idea what you're doing, and you'll never sell that property because I'll have so many liens against that property. Your head will be spinning. Will I ever do that? I doubt it. But Go ahead, test me. Go ahead, make my
And scene.
day. There you go.
Oh, my goodness.
Equal opportunity. So this is the same exact paragraph as it is in the exclusive right to buy agreement. You're not going to, fair housing, and you're not going to discriminate. Broker definition, pretty much the same thing. I'm not a property inspector, zoning expert, tax advisor, blah, blah, blah. Agency information, exact same thing, except this one's properly numbered. It's 7, not 8. And so this is where we're reiterating that we're a non-designated agency, and you're getting the consent of the seller to the possibility that dual agency might happen because you've already disclosed what dual agency is, and that you'll provide them written notice if it happens. Cooperating compensation, we're just reiterating one more time to make sure that they're aware that we're going to take a portion of the fee that we charge them and giving that to somebody else. And it's based on our company policy, which is 2.5 in Andover or North Andover, 2.0 elsewhere. Construction of the agreement, the exact same paragraph as you saw in the exclusive right to buy agreement. Last paragraph, seller's responsibilities. And this is what I use to try and make sure that the seller is aware that they have a responsibility as well. Here are their responsibilities. Seller agrees and acknowledges the property here in name may be shown at any time in accordance with the seller's showing instructions, which you will get before you list the property. Seller agrees to keep the property in safe showing condition at all times, to include but not limited to snow removal, ice remediation, etc., through and including day of transfer of title. Safe showing condition means what to you, Julie? Yes, I thought you were asleep, so I figured we'd pick up.
No.
Okay.
Safe showing condition is like you said, snow removal or anything else. Like you don't want to leave like a shovel in the front walkway and that someone can trip on. You want to make it.
Yep. Let me give you another
Okay.
real example. It happened to a friend of Lillian's, and I don't remember the specifics, but it was new construction. There was no stairs to the basement. They showed the property in the dark, went to go down the basement, fell to their death.
No.
That is not safe showing condition.
Whatever.
Somebody Lillian knew on the other side of the country.
What about like a vicious dog or something?
Same thing, right? Safe showing condition means that the people in the house will be safe. Now, the other thing is, let me ask you a question. We're running out of time. So I'll just take a poll here. Winter's coming. Snow is coming. You're going to be doing open houses in the winter. Aren't you excited?
Yes,
Okay.
very.
So it's Sunday morning. It's snowing like a banshee. You're still going to do what we decide that we're still going to do open houses. You can't answer. You get to the house and the sidewalk has not been shoveled. What's your choice of answer? A, grab your shovel or a shovel and shovel the walkway so that you can hold your open house. B, cancel the open house or call the office, call Eric and figure out what to do. Or C, cancel the open house. Julie, what do you think? A, so you break out your shovel. Madison, what do you think?
I'm sorry. I don't think breakout.
That's an unsafe showing condition.
Little chihuahua.
I'm sorry. She's probably gonna bark again, but I'm gonna say I don't break out the shovel.
Don't break out the shovel. So are you calling Eric or just canceling the open house?
I would call you.
Okay. Yeah. Mariah,
Um,
A, B, or C?
I'm gonna go with door number 2. I'm gonna call it.
There was no number 2. Is it B?
B.
Okay, so that's good.
Door B.
I'm gonna want a shovel, but I feel like I don't want to be liable if someone slips from my shovel.
Bingo.
So
We'll
I'm
just
gonna
stop it
say-
right there. The minute you shovel somebody's walkway, you own the liability
Okay.
in Massachusetts.
So I call Eric. What do I do?
And Eric is gonna say, we're either gonna, if it's your seller, I'm gonna say, pick up the phone and call your seller and ask them if they can get the house prepared.
Okay.
And if your seller says, I can't, then you're gonna let the seller know that if the house, you agree to keep it in safe showing condition, it's not, and I am not going to take on the liability. As great customer service as that might be, I am not taking on that liability. Okay?
It's good practice that if you know that it's gonna be snowing before an open house, to just like shoot them a text and let them know like, hey, make sure that you shovel, or else we'll have to cancel.
We'll generally do that. I mean, we try to be proactive about it if we know the storm's not coming. If the storm, so we set up open houses on Wednesday, we usually get confirmation from the sellers on Wednesday. If we know there's gonna be a storm, we'll tell them then. If a storm gets, pops up or is about to pop up, we'll call ahead and remind them. And then we'll also let them know if we're expecting a lot of snow, we'll let them know that we'll make a call by 10 o'clock in the morning. And I'll make that call, or Lillian will make that call, and then we'll figure out how to deal with it.
But if you're like at an open house, it's like snowing super hard and like it doesn't, when you get there, it's not terrible, but then in an hour later.
Again, my general rule of thumb is your safety comes first.
Okay.
And if you feel that your safety's in danger, you stop what you're doing regardless. I'll deal with the sellers afterwards, because I can't imagine there's gonna be a seller in the world that's gonna say, yeah, you should have stayed for that avalanche.
Yeah, okay. I've been at many jobs where you got there no matter what.
So have I, but
Yeah,
the
no, I know.
reality is, and I appreciate the commitment, but
This
that's,
is different, so
this is-
other people are involved.
right. Seller agrees to notify a broker in writing of any unsafe or unfinished conditions that exist in the property and the property designated such areas within the property. It goes back to that no staircase down to the basement type thing. Seller agrees and acknowledges that the broker is not in any way responsible for keeping the property in safe showing condition. The broker will not be required to do so unless agreed to in writing. You're never going to agree to in writing. I'm certainly not going to agree to in writing on behalf of Lily, who is the broker. You are not the broker, so don't ever agree to in writing. Okay? Seller hereby holds the broker harmless for any injuries, property damage, or liability, et cetera, that may occur during the listing period. So if somebody's in the house and trips down the stairs and breaks their neck, we're not responsible for that unless you push them. So don't push people down the stairs, okay?
We don't get caught doing it.
Or don't
Make sure
get
there's no
caught.
cameras first.
Seller agrees the broker reserves the right to cancel scheduled activities without notice due to the presence of unsafe showing conditions at any time in which walkways and access to the property is restricted by natural or other obstructions. If you got a bunch of homeless people sitting on the sidewalk and you can't get to it, we'll probably cancel the open houses. Open house requests and confirmations by the seller hereby must be made by 4 p.m. on Wednesday for the upcoming weekend. You switch over to the last page, it talks about the video and audio recording. What is this saying? Both in Mass and New Hampshire, it's a crime to record anyone without their consent. That's both video and audio. Subsequently, if a listed property has video or audio surveillance equipment of any kind, including camera, doorbells, Alexa, or similar equipment, it must be disarmed, turned off, or removed prior to all showings in the open houses. In order to, and you're going to get them to acknowledge that there is equipment and they're going to comply, or no, it's not equipment. And then you're also going to make sure that it indemnifies people. So here's the issue just that happened recently to me, which Louis referenced but didn't really go into detail. So I went and did the open house for Sail Way. I had not looked at the property yet. Other than on MLS, and I hadn't looked at the pictures. And I walked in, and I haven't seen a kitchen like that since I was a kid. And I went, wow, to myself, the house is empty. Wow, this is updated. This is not updated. The seller picked up a phone and called Lily and said, why is your agent saying out loud in the house that the house isn't updated?
The ghost could hear you.
Because they had a live camera.
They went like every room. That
They
place
signed
was
it.
super weird.
They signed that. So Lily made some excuse, that's fine. She kind of texted me and let me know to keep and then I saw the cameras and I was like, okay, as soon as I saw the camera, I didn't say anything, but I should have known.
Should apologize.
I was at an open house over on Thistle 4 years ago, and there was a hidden camera that I was unaware of. And Lily gets a call in the middle of it saying, what's that?
I remember that.
Gets in the middle of it and says, well, your agent's got a lot of people there. Shouldn't there be a second agent there? And he's saying this and that and everything else. And Lily's like, well, how do you know that? Well, I've got a camera. Turn your camera off. The good news is that I didn't say anything that wasn't appropriate, or I didn't make stuff up, and I wasn't saying things about the seller and things like that. But assume there's a camera in this day and age. Assume there's a listening device on.
There's a camera at Cheapen in the garage. I think-
Okay.
I
Just
don't even
assume
know
it.
about that.
Okay. Don't do what I did and talk to yourself out loud, which I do all the time. And make stupid comments like, wow, this really needs to be updated. So that's the agreement. Question?
I have a
So,
question.
Go ahead, Madison.
Me first? Okay. So I was a little confused on, so section 3, the blanks are just start date and end date, right? And then
Yep.
between section 2 and 2A and 2B, is that just your owed compensation if someone breaches the contract? Or like if you list a property and start date and end date and you don't sell the property within that time frame, is that saying you're still owed a compensation?
It's, the protection period is saying we're still owed compensation if we introduce somebody during the term the contract was valid. And then after that contract ends, that one of those buyers that we introduced to the property goes to the seller directly and says, I want to buy from you, and buys the house, we're still owed a fee because we introduced them to the property. That's
Okay.
our argument.
Okay, so just clarifying, so if you list a
Yeah.
property and during the time frame you do not sell the property, that means that you do not get commission.
Correct. So if
Okay.
the contract runs the course of the term of the contract and it expires, the contract's no longer valid.
Yeah. Would they pay the administration fee for
Nothing.
the?
Nothing. They pay nothing because whenever the fees are due. The fees are due when the house gets sold. And if you don't sell the house, how are you ever going to get paid?
Okay, perfect. Okay.
No problem. Jessica?
I was just saying, how long does it take to explain this, because it's a little longer than the exclusive right to buy. Or maybe
15 minutes,
Yeah, okay. Maybe you can do it for us next time all the way.
perhaps, maybe.
But
Okay.
you guys don't want to hear it again, I'll just come.
Okay.
No,
It seems like a lot of information.
When do we give this to the,
Are you ready to hire me? You are? Great. Here. Sign here. Press hard 3 copies.
This will be the second thing to sign. I'll read up the state agency. This is what they'll sign.
this is the date line. Is that
This
okay?
is my-
No, those are initials.
Oh, two initials.
to bring this to my meeting?
Of course you do, because what happens if you ask for the business and they say, okay?
Yeah,
You better be prepared.
okay.
You got a meeting on
Cool, tonight.
that?
Cold call face to face tonight. Okay.
You going to their property or?
Julie, any questions?
I have to bring somebody with me.
I did have a question about when you were talking about MLS, the contingent and then under agreement. So would under agreement be after the PNS is signed and contingent
Once
is
the purchase
before?
and sale is signed, yeah. Contingent is when the offer is accepted, and there's 6 flavors of contingent. We only use one, which is pending purchase and sale. That's still considered an active status. So what does that mean? That means that the property still shows for sale in the likes of Zillow and Realtor.com and so on and so forth. Once the property in our world is a signed purchase and sale, we change it to under agreement. Not every office does that. Some offices do it once the commitment's in place and whatnot. We've chosen to do it once the purchase and sale is signed. That's when we change it to under agreement, which is an off-market status, and it notifies, it essentially, Zillow and Realtor.com can't see the property when it's an off-market status.
Thank you.
Okay. Madison, questions? Nope.
I'm all set.
Maya? Okay.
No,
Is the dog okay?
I think it was like DHL or something.
Okay.
You know.
No
Is that what that's what it's called? Am I brain fart? DHL? Yeah.
No,
no.
okay. Jessica?
Not right now.
Jonathan?
With her situation or a similar situation that she's going through tonight.
Yeah.
A lot of these expired and I'm not sure if they expired.
Just for sale. She's
So-
thinking about selling it. She's not sure. She wants to wait. She wants to sell now or wait until the construction outside.
Where is the construction done?
She thinks next year, next spring.
So let me ask you a question.
Spring.
What's going to happen next spring in the real estate market?
That's what I was saying. I said, well, you don't know what's gonna happen in the market. I mean, the market's great right now to sell, so why not get, you know, and and everything's
There is
going very
no better time to sell than right now,
and everything's going very quickly, so.
especially in Somerville.
Mm-hmm, the penthouse.
Somerville. Okay,
So with someone like, I'll speak for myself in my experience, to walk into a house, I mean, I have a general idea from viewing.
so one foot in front of the other.
But in terms of when, a lot of these people are looking for a price, whether if it was expired because their agent didn't get them the price they wanted. So us going to their place, in their mind is for us to walk in and say, yes, I do agree that I can get you $600,000 with us, or no, I don't think I can get you that. Because a lot of them are saying, well, I would only sell if I can get $600,000, for example.
How would you know that until you actually have a detailed conversation?
Right, that's what I mean. So once I'm there and I see the property and have a conversation with them, like, do you already go in with what's it called, CMS? No.
I might.
Um,
I wouldn't suggest that you do that because you're not equipped or trained or have the experience, more importantly, to be able to likely convert that person.
So would it just be that we could go view, we talk to them about what they want, and then we'll get back to us? We do
Yeah,
the
because
analysis?
here's what's gonna happen. Tonight, as sure as I'm sitting here, the woman's gonna say, so what do you think?
Right, that's,
What do you think
Oh,
my
I-
property's worth? And your response is gonna be what?
that's what I mean.
Your response is gonna be what?
I don't know, because.
Well, no. Your response is gonna be, you know, I needed to come see the property before I do my analysis.
Okay,
Because whatever might be available online, my experience is sometimes pictures are better, sometimes pictures are worse.
yeah,
Sometimes I don't have not all the information's out there. So I'm here to make sure I understand what the property is, and I'll get back to you. No, really, I won't hold you to it. What do you think it's worth? I'm not prepared to tell you, because the last thing I want to do is set an expectation and then
mm-hmm.
not meet that expectation.
I wanna get all the information.
I need all the information to be able to properly complete an analysis.
Yeah.
Would you, I don't think you want me to wing it, do
She's
you?
meeting with she's meeting with that listing agent on Friday.
Okay.
So like, how do I secure her business without getting, like, having the pricing and all that stuff?
Well, you just ask her, you say, are you hiring me to tell you the price you want, or are you hiring me to get you sold?
She's meeting with another agent on Friday, is that what you're saying? Or she's interviewing you and another agent?
Well, she was gonna have that other agent come, but she likes that I'm a girl. So,
Okay.
and she likes
I'm
talking.
gonna start using high-pitched voice on bookings.
So I just wanna make sure that I get her business.
The only way that you're gonna succeed is by asking a lot of questions.
Okay.
So you better have a list of questions to take.
I'll print a bunch of questions. I have a form that I actually made for when I went to First Street, and I'll print that for you.
So what I'd like you to do is go over that form and come see me and I'll walk you through it. But the reality is that you need to qualify. Why are you selling on your own?
Yeah.
Why hasn't it sold?
Mm-hmm.
You're contemplating a realtor now. What are you looking for in a realtor?
Oh, and she used to be a real estate agent.
Great. So what are you looking for?
Yeah, but she's like, well, I have to get reset. I was like, well, save the time, save the money. You're a single, she's
Yep.
a mother.
Yep.
I was like, let me do it for you.
Yep.
And she said, yeah. I was like, yeah.
Awesome. So having been a licensed agent, what do you look for? What are you looking for? And what qualities do you want from the agent that you hire to do the job?
Yeah.
And let her tell you. And then miraculously, you're going to meet all those criteria, aren't you? Because you're in sales.
What does Bob say, agents be like, always be like, not closing, but like asking?
Curiosity.
Oh, curious, yeah.
Always be curious. But you have to ask the right question, right? That's why I always say, remember what is confidential is motivation, timing, and value. So those are the exact questions you need to ask.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think the property is worth and why? How long have you had it on the market? Why hasn't it sold? What's the response been? Have you had any offers? If you did, what were the offers? Why didn't you take the offer? How many people have you had through? How many phone calls have you taken? So
Every single one of those questions is on the thing I'll print for you guys,
Okay.
because he's the one who told me the questions, and I made that form.
Thank you.
I haven't actually showed you the form. I made like a full form for it, though.
Okay.
Okay.
I'm gonna see if someone, will be able to come with me.
If I had more notice, I'd say yes, but I have another commitment, so I apologize.
Who could go?
I texted, I asked Nicole that she couldn't, but, and this is like the one that
Bobby? Jacob?
Where's the?
I'll figure it out.
So even if you can't, keep the appointment
Yeah. I'll figure it
and ask the questions.
out. Okay.
This is research, so it's good. You know.
Yeah, and even if you're there by yourself, having never done this before,
Thank
having
you.
read Fake It Till You Make It, and you're gonna put the questions on the clipboard, and when you get there, you're gonna say, do you mind if I ask you a couple questions? More importantly, do you mind if I make notes? I wanna make sure that when I come back to you with the answers that you're looking for, that I've contemplated everything that we talked about today,
Okay.
right? And then you now have an excuse to write things down, and more importantly, look at your clipboard and look at all the damn questions that you're not gonna remember to ask.
Okay.
Just a thought. Jonathan, questions? Jessica, questions? Luch? No. Okay. See you Friday, some of you.
Teacher,
Thank you.
what day is the third?
Saturday.
What day is it?
Saturday.
Oh, good luck. You're taking it Saturday?
You're muted.
You're muted.
You'll be fine.
You're gonna
Thank
do
you.
great. We're gonna have a study session Friday.
Yes, we are. Thanks, Jess. Bye, guys.
Yeah.
Bye.